Please, no! Somebody has to stop them! No! No!
And invariably, you will have people from the West, particularly Anglo-West, commenting, "Oh my God, this is terrifying."
They're training their citizenry for war right now. Whether or not they're going to war is to be seen, but they're getting ready for war. And I mean, they are on like a civilian level. Like they are just pushing these people to coordinate. Even the kids, the way they bounce basketballs and then jump to the right and bounce the basketball and jump to the right. Like they're training these kids to become soldiers. Mm-hmm. That would be my next guess, is that the Chinese would go in and try and become the military police. But
which is completely bullshit.
Good to see you, Jerry. Where is Carl? Yeah, he's not here yet. Somebody's asking in the chat room. So we're waiting on Carl till he come in. At the same time, you and I will start the conversation. Anyway, what I wanted to get your take, Jerry, is why some of us in the West, we don't get China. We don't understand China. Why is that?
We don't. I have to be honest, I didn't for a long time too. We are completely misinformed about China. That's one aspect of it. Just about everything you ever read or see or watch about China is wrong. They take a story which has a kind of grain of truth, 2% truth, and then they misinterpret, and then it becomes, look what China have done now, they're really bad. And there's always this headline, but at what cost? And it's because we're culturally very, very different people. There are two great psychologists in the world. One is called Gert Hofstede, and the other is called Alfonso Trompenas. And these two guys, oh, there's Carl. Hi, Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Hey, Jerry.
Good
Hey,
to
David.
see you, man.
Good to see you guys.
A lot of people were already asking. It's like, where's Carl? I see he'll be here, man. Just give it a time. Give it a time. He'll be here. So I was asking, and I'll ask you a question too, Carl, after Jerry finishes his answers. I was asking the question that many of us in the West, we don't get China. We don't understand China. And I wanted to have Jerry's inputs. Then I'll address the same question to you. Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
So, yeah, effectively, I was talking about these two psychologists, Gert Hofstede and Alfonso Trompenas. They are adversaries in their fields. They do not cooperate with each other, but they have both come to the same conclusion, that there is such a thing as national identities. Culture is different in different countries. And both of them have termed these, and I like Hofstede. It's much simpler for me to understand because I'm a very simple person. And Hofstede has 6 dimensions of culture. Now, in 2 of those dimensions, Westerners and Chinese people are similar. But in 4 of his dimensions, we are very, very different. And this is something that we don't notice or we don't know about. Everything that a Chinese person will do behaviorally in terms of psychology is based on their experience, their knowledge, their life. It's based on how they grew up. And they grew up with a respect for authority. They grew up with a respect for hard work. They grew up with a desire to be frugal and less individual than we are. We are individuals. The Americans are high. The Australians are higher. The Brits are not quite so high. But basically, when you look at these 3 Anglo-Saxon countries, they're on a scale, they're right up very, very high. And China is the opposite. Where America is high, China is low. Where America is low, China is high. And this is the thing, that what a Chinese person will do with the same set of stimuli is different to what an American or what a Brit will do. Now, this is why we get it so wrong, because I studied workplace psychology under Western management philosophy. So Chinese workplace psychology under Western management philosophy. Basically, what this means is managers say, I want you to get this done in the way that most Western managers would. And then the Chinese person will go away and do something entirely different or not do it at all without saying a word. Now, what the hell happened there? And this is the psychology. The Western, almost all the books about management are written by Westerners. When you come to work in a factory here, now the same thing applies when a Chinese factory tries to do business in the West. There are these conflicts happening all the time because they just do things differently. They react differently to the same set of stimulus. And anybody who really wants to delve very deeply into if they haven't already, then just go look at, it's called Hofstede Insights online. Hofstede is HOFSTEDE -insights and .com. And you'll find you can actually put in, if you live in, it doesn't matter what country, if you live in Zimbabwe and you want to compare Zimbabwe to China, if you live in Algeria and you want to compare Algeria to France, there will be differences. So yeah, you can actually put this in and have a look on a graph and then read the description of what each of these dimensions of culture means. That's why Westerners, they look at China's, Western capitalists, if we want to call it that, they look at China's communist state and say, it can't work. But Chinese people say, well, it's working. It's working very well for us. You know, our government is looking after us very well. And the Westerners looking down and saying, yeah, but they're oppressing you. No, they're not. They're looking after me. That's the different view.
Interesting. By the way, guys, for those who do not know, Jerry has an MA, Masters of Art, in cross-cultural change management. So the cultural aspect is very, very important. Now I'm going to turn it over to you, Carl, because the community is interested in your perspective. So, and it will be the same question, but I am also very interested in learning why we don't get China. Where is the thing that we're not able to understand about China, given now the changes that it's happening?
Well, I think there's one reason, like Jerry pointed out, there's cultural difference. Anglo-Saxon societies like U.S., Australia, U.K., etc., they prized individualism, and sometimes I would say they prize hyper-individualism. I mean, one example is, giving Olympics. Olympics opening ceremony is a big talking point nowadays. And a lot of people are reposting the opening ceremony of 2008 Beijing Olympics, where you had thousands of people doing synchronized flatness. And invariably, you will have people from the West, particularly Anglo-West, commenting, "Oh my God, this is terrifying." And then they will immediately go into, I have a tweet here. He said, the contrast between the synchronized flatness of collectivism and the unruliness and dynamism of American individualism. I mean, this is just a very innocent performance of people, Chinese people doing a display, trying to create a spectacle for their guests, for the people. They aim to impress. Yet people are reading this into, this is their slavish collectivism, whereas we are much better because we are more dynamic because of individualism.
They're training their citizenry for war right now. Whether or not they're going to war is to be seen, but they're getting ready for war. And I mean, they are on like a civilian level. Like, they are just pushing these people to coordinate. Even the kids, the way they bounce basketballs and then jump to the right and bounce the basketball and jump to the right. Like, they're training these kids to become soldiers. That would be my next guess, is that the Chinese would go in and try and become the military police. But
which is completely bullshit. But that's how people are conditioned. There has been cultural conditioning from very young age. It's not genetic, it's culture. Another example, I think, there was with a recent U.S. election, and there was a internet Twitter person who tweeted, so why is it that the Indian immigrants do so much better in U.S. than the Chinese? And I think it's also cultural because United States prize in U.S. that if you're extroverted, if you're outspoken, if you're assertive, that's been prized. That's seen as leadership quality. And in this sense, India have very similar cultural disposition. A lot of from my experience in the IT world, my Indian coworkers tend to be big talkers. They're very eloquent, and so that those just happen to be the cultural traits that's being prized in United States. U.S. see when you are a big loudmouth talker, like, okay, you're a great politician, right? But that's not how in China how the people are brought up. The Chinese Confucian culture, much more emphasis is placed on self-effacing humility. To be respectful, to be polite, to you don't need to always trying to assert your dominance over others, because especially in China, when you have so many people, that could potentially cause a lot of conflict. So you want to be as cooperative as possible with other people. But those are not the cultural traits that's been valued in U.S., especially for leadership position. So I observe this in both corporate world and the politics in U.S. They want you to be big talkers. That's what they like. But in China, so this is the cultural explanation. But there's also a deep ignorance about China in the West. We all accept people are different. There's different cultures. Why can't we just get along, right? Why can't we just get along? Just accept the cultural difference and get along. But there has been decades of Cold War propaganda being waged in the West against China, in particular, after founding of People's Republic in 1949. So there was a recent survey, a global opinion survey, that shows in the West, a 3/4 of the people in the West now have very negative opinions about China. But in the world outside of the West, 70% of the world population have rather positive opinion. It's flipped. Most of the people outside the West have positive opinion about China. And I think this cannot be attributed to cultural difference, because there's other parts of the world have very different cultures from China or United States or the Anglosphere. This is a result of propaganda, because the people in the West have been relentlessly fed disinformation about China. And so they don't know any better. For people who haven't traveled to China, who haven't lived in China for a long time, like Jerry has, they just don't know any better. Their only source of information about China often is from their mainstream media or some a post on Reddit, and those are overwhelmingly negative. Now it's not only the mainstream media that's feeding this information about China anymore, because with the proliferation of social media, the U.S. three-letter agencies and U.S. government had figured out a way to game social media. There's a recent report coming from the Philippines just a month ago. Pentagon. This is Reuters investigation. It turns out Pentagon ran an anti-vaccine campaign in the Philippines because they didn't want the people in the Philippines to take Chinese vaccines. This started under the Trump administration in the initial phase of COVID, because the United States, they're hoarding all the vaccines for itself. Whatever's left, they're selling it at a very high price to the countries, to the rest of the country. Whereas China was making the Chinese-made vaccines readily available to all over the globe, including the Philippines. In fact, but then the Philippine President Duterte made a personal appeal to China to make sure Philippines is in the front of the line to get the Chinese vaccines. So what the U.S. government saw this as China is gaining on United States in influence. So they felt they need to combat it. So they actually formed a social media campaign. They created a lot of fake accounts to spread disinformation about Chinese vaccine in the targeting Filipinos. And they will say stuff like, everything coming from China is fake. The only COVID is real. Only the COVID virus coming out from China is real. You can't trust anything else. And what ended up happening was this: it fostered a whole Philippines became the least vaccinated nation in Southeast Asia as a result. And even when the Western vaccine became available, people are hesitant to take it because they're already against vaccines, any kind of vaccines. And this campaign persisted into the early Trump administration until like finally the Facebook and both Facebook and Twitter, they become aware what Pentagon is doing because they can monitor who are the fake accounts. And they went to have a private talk with Pentagon, say like, can you please stop this? You are spreading COVID disinformation. And the Pentagon resisted. So the Facebook went to the Biden administration, which at the time was pro-vaccine. So Biden administration had to make an executive decision to tell Pentagon to stop doing this. But the Pentagon also asked Facebook not to ban those fake accounts. By claiming those fake accounts that were created to combat terrorism. So those fake accounts still exist right now on Facebook, spreading other disinformation. So right now, like this is people in the West have been bombarded by relentlessly by propaganda, and this is why China is adopting a little more proactive approach recently by issuing visa-free policy which extended to a lot of European countries. Not right now, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Portugal, Ireland. Now you can go travel to China 30 days visa-free. The idea is you come to China, see it with your own eyes. A lot of time that will dispel a lot of the media misinformation and propaganda that they have been conditioned with. And I think that's very effective because now on YouTube, you see a lot of vloggers are vlogging about their coming to China and say, oh, wow, China is totally not what I expected. They didn't tell us about this China. And which is, I think, because people-to-people exchange is, I still think that's the best way to bring the world together. But United States government is trying to do the opposite. Now they're trying to issue travel. United States put a level 3 warning on travel to China. Level 3 warning, which is the same warning that applied to states in the midst of civil war, like Ethiopia, right? And they're saying China is so dangerous, you should go. It couldn't be further from the truth. China is one of the safest countries in the world. And they're also trying to tell people not go to Xinjiang, right? Xinjiang is a place where U.S. State Department is accusing China of committing genocide on the Uyghur population. And unlike Tibet, you can actually travel to Xinjiang freely as long as you have a valid Chinese visa. So anybody can go. Now there's a lot of vloggers, again, on YouTube, not just Anglo vlogger, but also vloggers from Japan, from India, from the Arab world. Many of them are traveling to Xinjiang and vlogging their experience there, and which paints a totally different picture from like the genocide narrative that's being pushed by the State Department. So United States government now don't want to discourage people from going to Xinjiang, as their rationale is saying by going to Xinjiang you're supporting the genocide. You're supporting the Chinese narrative. It's like they're telling people don't trust your eyes. Do not trust your own eyes. Trust us. Trust we're the only official real news, non-fake news. Like this is totally 84. I mean, like it's 1984. War is peace, and so I think that's what major factor contributing to now. First of all, there was already ignorance, but the compounding that ignorance was disinformation. So this is why there's 3/4 of the people surveyed in the West now have a negative opinion of China, when most of them probably never even traveled to China. They don't even know how it.
Let me ask Jerry, since you mentioned Tibet, and Jerry, is that okay if I mention where you were?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. I always like to have permission before. Just for you guys to know, Jerry and I, we talked as to when he informed me about his trip. And since Carl mentioned Tibet, can you, Jerry, please let us know what you saw, how things are, and especially now that I just I found out that now there are some tensions created by India because of what China discovered. They discovered some discovery in Tibet on the far side of the Chinese land. There's some natural resources discovery or something. India now is making some sort of a major problem about it. So if you would be kind and just...
Historically, there's a problem called the McMahon line, and this was the British government just over 100 years. I think it was 1916, 17, sometime around there. Carl's nodding; he knows. He's better at history than I am. That McMahon line was drawn by the British and has created problems ever since, because the Chinese government weren't involved in the discussions, and that created a problem. The British government drew a line and said, "This is India and that's China," and that's how those particular problems existed. And China said, "Well, no, that's actually not true. The Aksu Chin is part of China. It's been part of Tibet forever, and it's been part of China for more than 1,000 years. So it's ours. We're gonna stick with that." And that's where you have this line of actual control, the LAC, where they have the clashes, and nobody carries firearms up there. They all just carry very lethal-looking sticks. I've just come back from Tibet. Now, I have to be honest here. I'm going to make some videos of my own about Tibet, but I'm going to put the cards on the table here and I'm trying to be transparent. I was taken there by the Tibetan government. I was invited there by the Tibetan government with about 30 other vloggers. Now, there's two very unusual things going on here. One is I was the only foreigner. And the other thing is, in terms of numbers, I'm tiny. I've got 38,000 followers on YouTube. Some of these people had 7 million followers on Chinese media. So the Chinese government is really trying to show what it is. But then, of course, you're with the Chinese government, so it's a fairly stage-managed event. You don't get much free time, and you are stage-managed. You're taken from one place to the next place to the next place. Now, having said that, you have to drive to get there. So you do see the countryside, you do see the villages, you do see the smaller towns as you're driving through them, and you're going to this state-managed farm to have a look at how they're growing record-breaking pumpkins or something like that. And you did see stuff like that. But the bottom line is, if there's any oppression going on in Tibet, they're doing a very, very good job of hiding it. It's just not possible to see. Now, I am trained in looking at things like this. I'm a former police officer. I've got years of experience of interview techniques and things like that. And I've traveled extensively through both Xinjiang and most of China. But until a week ago, I hadn't been to Tibet. I spent 8 days there, and I only came back, it's Sunday morning now. I came back Friday evening. And after 8 days in Tibet. So I've got pages and pages of notes on my laptop, and I'm going to be forming them into scripts, which are going to become 3 videos. So there'll be a lot more information later. But the fact is, I sensed the problem is not the Tibetan people. The problem is the Chinese people. They have a sense of insecurity about what they have there. And you can see this. You go to the museum, and the museum is run by the Chinese. The Tibetans are Chinese, but it's run by the central government rather than the local government. And they have artwork which kind of depicts the liberation of Tibet rather than artwork which depicts Tibetan culture. They've got a mixture of both, but it's definitely there. And you can see this. There is propaganda there, but the fact is, it's designed to tell what really did happen. There was a liberation of Tibet rather than an invasion of Tibet. Now, there are people who would argue that. There's certainly a lot of people in Washington who would argue with me about that. But if you go to Tibet and you ask the Tibetans, and I did, they won't argue with you about that. It was liberated. It is much better now. However, as everything happens, there's some form of cultural changes going on. Now, what's happened to there are still people who dress very Tibetan style, just walking down the street, but most people don't. Most people are wearing jeans and T-shirts and a jacket, Western style clothing. Now, you could say there's a cultural appropriation there and they're forcing the culture out, but that's not true. They're doing the opposite. The Chinese government are pushing the culture so that it's now becoming more of a tourist thing than anything. And I see the same thing happening if you go to Hawaii, if you go to Fiji, wherever you go, Western culture has changed their local culture And the same thing is happening in Tibet. It's a natural progression when you move from a traditional cultural, your life was quite poor, your life was short usually, and now they have better education, they have better health, they have better wealth, they have better lifestyles, and they don't have as much of the original culture. But I went into a private house, a personal visit to a private house, and there's a huge great room. So why is the room so big? It's massive. Oh, this is because this is the room that we have our parties and dances in. And then we went a few doors down the road. It's exactly the same house. We have our dances and parties here. So their culture is still there. It's private, but it is changing. It's a fact of life. It is changing because historically that's what happens when people move from the former life that they had to the new life that they've got now. And I asked a question. I was in a village and I asked a question, how many kids go to university from this village? About 50% of the kids graduate high school, go to university, and about 30% of them come back. About 20% go elsewhere. And I asked the question, where are they going to university? And anywhere where they want to go. I mean, if they qualify, they can go to Beijing. And I met in this art gallery, actually, I met two internationally educated Tibetan kids, or not kids. One was 30, the other was 25. And one was educated in Brighton in the UK, the other one in Lancaster in the UK. And well, how did you feel when you're in the UK? Oh, it's great. Everybody said they love Tibet, but they hate our government. What do you think about it? Well, the government are okay. Well, there you go. Tibetans telling me that the government are okay. These are Tibetan kids, internationally educated, and they weren't being monitored or anything silly like that. And by the way, I've been through Xinjiang several times, but twice on a bike. I've actually cycled 5,000 kilometers inside the borders of Xinjiang. Anyone can do that. And if you're going to try and hide oppression or genocide, you can't hide it from someone riding a bike wherever they wanted to go. And that's what we did. We literally went anywhere we wanted to go, and we rode in and out of Xinjiang twice.
So very interesting. Where's Carl?
Carl's just dropped out.
Disconnect here, so he'll come back. We'll come back here. Yeah, sometimes the connection. I've always once in a while when anytime I have a conversation with Carl, it gets disconnected. Then he'll come back again. So he'll come back again, and we'll. Here is Carl. Yeah, here you are. I thought I lost you, man. So, all right, let me turn it over to you, Carl.
I just want to add to some comments about Tibet. I
Sure.
think it's great to hear the stories and experience of Tibet from Tibetans themselves. That's why there is one channel I highly recommend on YouTube. It's called Tibet Travel. You go to Tibet Travel. It's actually a channel by a Tibetan a tour operator. He's a local Tibetan. He takes people around Tibet, and his vlog is done in English. And he really presents Tibet from a Tibetan perspective, and it is very accessible because it's in English. I highly recommend people go check it out, and you can see what life in Tibet is really like for ordinary Tibetans.